Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Asian Hustle Network podcast. Today, we have a very special guest with us. His name is Gaurav Bhattacharya. Gaurav is CEO and co-founder of involve.ai, a customer intelligence platform to empower companies with AI-based customer intelligence that drives transformational growth. He actively participates in the Los Angeles tech innovation ecosystem through panel discussions and mentoring. Bhattacharya started his career by founding a medical software business while still in high school. He is a Forbes 30 Under 30 alum and an accomplished technology leader speaking at major conferences and authoring several publications in this space. Gaurav, welcome to the show.
We're so excited to have Gaurav today on today's podcast. And this guy is an absolute genius, and we're so excited to hear more about his story. But before we dig deep into that, Gaurav, would you like to give an introduction on what was your upbringing like? And how did that help you become the entrepreneur you are today?
Hey, Brian, thank you for having me on the show and excited to be here. I've been an avid listener for so many episodes, so excited for the opportunity. Just a quick story about myself, Brian. I grew up in New Delhi, come from a very humble, poor family, lost my father to cancer when I was 2 years old. And my mother was a blue-collar worker, so she would work really hard. As you know how immigrant moms are, she made sure that she worked many jobs to provide for their family. One of the biggest things that I think was impactful for me, where I grew up, it wasn't the best neighborhood, and there were a lot of bullies there. So I never liked going outside and playing. My brother was a big video gamer, so one of my silver linings was just playing a lot of video games at home and being in my own bubble. I think that was my inspiration. I really felt that with video games, I can do whatever I want to do. I can be a character. I can be in scenarios. I would play a lot of games where I was in the United States or I was in Canada, I was in Europe, and I was doing cool things outside my bad neighborhood where I grew up. And that just inspired me to do amazing things. I feel like I started coding when I was 10 years old because of it. I built my first video game at 12, which was kind of like, just a game where you could take on and be any character and do anything you want to do. You could create your own world. I think that was my story. That's how I became an entrepreneur. And as you were alluding to, I went to high school in a coding class. I met my co-founder. She's a rock star programmer too, and we both were nerdy kids. So in hindsight, didn't make either of us cool, but we started our first company together, and that's kind of our story.
I think that's really cool, right? And I think that despite your very humble background, I can also relate to that. I grew up parts of East LA,
Yeah.
where it wasn't too safe as well. But man, I can admire that. The fact that you picked up coding at the age of 10 and built something by the age of 12, that's insane, right? And
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious too, like, were your parents engineers? Did they push you? Were they like, hey, Gaurav, what are you doing with your time? You gotta go study right now. Or was it very like self-motivated in a way where it's like one day you're like, I just want to learn how to code. And did you have any mentors or advice, or did you watch a TV commercial that got you into coding?
Oh man, what a great, thank you for that. I think um and it's so funny you say that, but my mother is very focused on my well-being, but not as much on education because she wasn't educated. And my father died very young when I was 2 years old. So I don't have like very similar parents to a lot of my friends who are always focusing, as you know, like a lot of Asian parents and immigrant parents are focused on kids' education. My mother was not so much, but she definitely is a disciplinarian. She definitely wanted me to wake up early morning, work hard, give my best, just like any other, I feel, immigrant parent. But growing up, I feel one of the best things that happened to me was we used to have this game called Counter-Strike. Have you ever played that game? It's a very famous like an old school first-person
Thanks for
shooter
calling
game.
me old, because
No,
I
no,
used to
not at
play
all. I
that.
meant old school. I played that game too growing up. Hey, we're not old at all, but that was like the one of the coolest, or the before Call of Duty became popular, I believe that it was Counter-Strike. So they had this kind of, you could modify the maps in that game. And I really wanted to kind of create my own maps for that game. So I started to learn code because of that. I was like, I have an opportunity. It's open source software. You can create any world you want to be in. That was my motivation. I think that was when I decided to start how to code. And talking about mentors, let me ask you, have you had a lot of advisors? Like you've done a lot of amazing things. Did you meet people along the way that helped you?
Yeah, I think mentors played a huge part of my life, right? And they really helped me look outside the box, believe in myself. I was one of those pretty low self-esteem kind of kids that I was like, man, like I'm not gonna be able to do great things. Like, um, so yeah, like having mentors really played a role in my self-belief and who I really want to be, right? So I'm kind of
Nice.
curious about you. It's like age 10, right? Like coding age 10, that is pretty absurd, especially given the fact that this is probably what, like 20, almost 20 years ago, I assume. Like that's a different time period to be learning how to code, right? So like what was the one catalyst that led you down that path where it's like, as you mentioned, like your mom was very strict, very disciplined on you. Like who was that person that was like, hey Gaurav, like you should learn how to code?
Yeah. I think I really look up to my brother. I would say my brother was a big mentor for me because we were for a long time our family was very poor, but he was very creative. And I don't think I'm that creative, but he has the creative gene in his family and he was always very entrepreneurial and very risk taking. So he was doing things like he was the first person to migrate to the United States in the family. He would always do things that are outside the norm and try to strive for it. I think he was definitely a big motivation for me to look up to. And I would say that he would be my first advisor. But just like you along the way, super lucky. I met incredible people. People when we were starting out our first company, people I met someone she was a rock star at not just engineering, but she was really good at sales. So she taught me how to do sales, which is an incredibly hard skill to master, I believe. Um, then I met someone along the way for this recent company who's our venture capitalist. His name is Mark, and he's on my board. And he's teaching me everything about finance and venture capital and how to raise money, how to run a company. Been incredibly blessed and very grateful for people I've met along the way who've helped me get here.
Definitely. What strikes me about your answer is how humble you are, right? And how much of a learner's mindset that you're able to take in. I feel like just that quality is so important in entrepreneurship or anything in general in order to be successful is that you have to be willing to learn. You have to be willing to take a step back and be like, I'm not the expert in this field. And that's okay. Like I want to be able to learn from everyone around me. And I really like the fact that you're so humble to the fact that you view yourself and everyone else sort of as mentors and mentees and learning from each other all the time. I really like that a lot.
Mhm.
And congratulations on being a Forbes 30 under 30.
Thank you.
I'm not surprised. I think this is well deserved. And I want to talk a little bit more about your current company, involve.ai. Like, what exactly is it? From a brief description online, it's a customer intelligent platform to empower companies with AI-based customer intelligence that drives transformation growth. And looking, if you guys can't see, Gaurav actually has
Yeah.
almost like a chart of his product in the back that we can see. If you guys maybe scroll over to our YouTube channel, you'll probably see this recording inside our YouTube channel. But yeah, tell us about this product. Like, what was it? What was the inspiration behind it? And like, how did you come about creating this company? And what company number is this?
Yeah, so it's company number two for me. And it's a very cool story on how it started, but it also epitomizes kind of how startups are and how you just don't know what your future is. But like you said, having that growth mindset and learning mindset is just so important. But we started this company as a very different idea. Our idea was we're going to create a consumer company where we're going to send people to have events and volunteer and do good for the community. Because we really wanted to do good and have a technology that supports anyone from anywhere in the world to be able to do something with their time and come together and help a nonprofit, help communities, help NGOs succeed. And when we started that, we kind of started honing on who our ideal customer profile is because we had a pretty broad vision. And one of the biggest challenges we had, Brian, was and in a lot of companies, sometimes you plan things to go a certain way and they didn't. We didn't have good product market fit. So we would lose, even though we had 500,000 users, we would almost lose 8% of them every month. So drop off was really high. Churn was a big issue for us. In order to solve that, being engineers, me and Samya, my co-founder, one of these nights we were just, you know, I think we were having wine. We were really upset. We were just disappointed in how where we wanted to go and where we were. So we just started coding. We took out our laptops and we were like, let's try to figure out which users are our best users so we can really double down on those users and kind of forget about everybody else who's not sticking around on the platform. So in order to do that, we built this kind of dashboard, which is like one of my first mock-ups, kind of how it's going to look like. And we started taking a lot of data from multiple sources just to try to figure out which users are happy and healthy and what can we learn about our customers from data that we already have. Like could be utilization metrics, how people use the product, and how much time are they spending on our media, on our social media, on doing different events. And the results were phenomenal, Brian. Like what we found was incredible. And at that moment, we knew that as a company grows, you kind of get away from your users and your customers, but you have like Slack messages with them, emails with them, phone calls, Zoom recordings, just these behavior patterns and how they use their product that can tell an amazing story. And that's what we built. So we decided to pivot almost like Slack, how Slack was a gaming company for many years and they built this collaboration tool internally. We decided to pivot, and that's what involve.ai is. It's a simple platform that can take your data, and we democratize customer data to tell amazing stories about your customer on how happy and healthy they are, how unhappy they are, what are they thinking, what are they saying, so that executives and leaders in a company know exactly what's going on with their customer base. And customer facing teams can be very proactive and data driven on how to solve these day-to-day customer issues that can happen.
Wow, that is awesome. I think that a very silver lining is that when you're frustrated, it's just cold.
Yeah.
I'm
Or
just
drink,
kidding.
right? Or drink, right? That's
Yeah.
what we were doing. I think we were.
So, I mean, let's talk a little bit more about this. And the biggest takeaway I got from that answer is focus, right? I think that like for most first time founders, early stage founders, it's like it's really hard to focus on one thing because essentially you don't really know who your target audience is at the moment, right? You
Yeah,
know you're building your
totally.
product, you know what you're trying to do with that product, but like sometimes what you think is the audience is not quite the audience. So you have to look at
Exactly.
data. So my question is like when you realize that drop off rate was decreasing 8% month by month, um, how did you reframe everything to realize that hey, like this is our target audience profile? Like what kind of factors did you list out? Like age group, demographics, profession, industry, location? Like how did you pinpoint that customer profile?
Yeah, I think it was really hard. It definitely was extremely hard because we had a lot of hypotheses, Brian, and a lot of times our hypotheses would be proved wrong. Like we had this hypothesis that college students would be a great profile. Then we pretty quickly figured out that that's not working. Then we moved to companies and we were like, okay, the young tech professionals are going to be the best people who are going to be doing it. And then we disqualified or disproved that hypothesis. The next one was executives like VPs, VP of marketing, like they would be extremely motivated to help nonprofits and community. And that worked for certain areas and demographics, but it didn't for others. So I think we did a lot of experimentation, and I would almost say sometimes like our lack of focus helped us find the answers. So even the focus is extremely important. I feel there's this creative process that you almost have to go through where you don't know what you're going to do in your life, right? Like it's almost that moment when you're 20 years old or 18 and you're trying to figure out, am I going to start a podcast show or am I going to be an engineer somewhere? Am I right? Like you're just trying to figure out what you're going to do in life. And until you do that thing, you don't really know if it's going to work or not. So I feel as much as focus is extremely valued, I feel there's also an important thing to just have fun and go through your creative journey and figure out what the right answer is.
Yeah, I'd say that everybody goes through that moment in their life of what am I doing? I would say that a moment of unclarity and unfocus is probably one of the best and worst time of anyone's life.
Yeah,
because
best in word. I think you described it perfectly. Have you had a moment like that?
of course, all of us do, right? A lot of us are realizing like I can be anything that I always wanted to be, but at the same time, it's like once you start working towards that goal, it's like, am I really happy? And that's the two things that has to be
Mm,
aligned because like you have to feel
yeah.
happy about the direction that you're going towards. But like I think Steve Jobs said this before too, right? When he got fired from Apple, it's like the best and worst thing in his life. And I feel like that's the same thing with figuring out your product market fit originally. It's like what I think is a customer is no longer a customer. And now we have to pivot our company. This is like the worst and best time, except that you're always under pressure because
Mhm.
you're running a company, you have to make payroll, you have to generate revenue and be sustainable, right? So there's a lot of pressures.
Exactly.
So the question I have for you, it's like I understand that you probably went through your fair shares of up and downs. How have you and your co-founder worked together to overcome these challenges, and like how are you able to work together cohesively for you to be able to take in his opinion, your opinion, and make that work? And how do you guys compromise whenever there's a conflict?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Sounds like what you're asking is what's the recipe for conflict resolution, right? Like whenever ideas don't align with your co-founder or with the person you work with.
Especially with a pivot. That's
Yeah,
difficult as heck. So like how do you make
yeah.
that work?
Man, I think it was really hard. And just initially, I just remembered the day. I remember there was this one day where I kind of knew that things are not working. I just had it in my gut. Like we had customers, we had real customers, we had people who were using the system, we had companies who were paying us. I think we had about 2 to 3 million in annual revenue already from what you were doing. So it wasn't that it wasn't like we were down to zero. Like I think it's always amazing when you launch something and everyone hates it and no one uses it. You have clear signs. But the worst is when you have mixed signs, right? Like that's kind of where we were. But almost at this one day, I remember I had this feeling it's not working. And I went to my co-founder. The question she asked me was, what are we going to do next? And I kind of pitched her this idea that, let's do what we built internally. And she told me, I understand it is exciting, but it's unproven. Like we don't know even if that's going to work. So somehow I was able to convince her and kind of figure that out. But the biggest problem we had was we had employees and staff that I had gotten super excited. I had motivated them on a vision, right? And they were like waking up every morning to make the world a better place, saying, this is the vision. We're going to help communities and nonprofits. And then I had VCs and venture capitalists who had taken money from and had sold them on this vision. So now we had to go back to them and almost unsell them on the earlier vision and sell them on this new vision that in our core and the bottom of our heart we knew may or may not work. That was so hard. We had incredible imposter syndrome. I just remember like being depressed for hours and days, just thinking about how am I going to realign everybody towards this new goal where we don't even know if that's going to be successful. I think that was incredibly hard. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but just reliving those days, I feel
Oh man.
um, conflict is hard and it shouldn't be avoided. And I think the only way to have a good conflict resolution is just have open and transparent conversations. And that's what we did. We went to our board and we told them that this company we feel is not working out, and here's why. And we have two paths. We can either return the capital we have left so that you guys don't lose all your money, or we can try this new thing that we don't know if it will succeed. We have some early signs, but it's not proven yet. We did the same thing with our staff and said anyone wants to leave can leave, or people who want to stay can go on with the second journey with us. And our board was incredibly supportive. They said, hey, we backed you guys as founders, not the idea. And some people left in our team. Like some people walked out the door and said, help us find other jobs. Some of them stayed. I remember like 6 people stayed and 8 people left. So it was incredibly hard to go through that journey. But I think being transparent and open and being vulnerable really helped us go through that conflict.
Oh man, that story just made me feel like, that punch in the gut feeling where it's like, oh man, like that's hard. And that's
It's
something that,
relatable, right? Like I'm sure everyone goes through
yeah,
something like. Have you had an incident like that where you had
uh,
to make a really hard decision?
of
And
course, it's a part of business, right? It's very normal. And I want more and more listeners to hear about these struggles and stories because like I feel like nowadays it's like entrepreneurship is so glamorized in media where it's like you get the nice cars, the nice food, the nice jewelry, whatever it is, to find life. Yeah, it's like very like 1% of like people actually get up there. So like fail rate's like super high. Right. And I feel like just you sharing like the tough conversations, the management, the pivot, the communication with your co-founder, it's all crucial to being successful as a founder, right? But the most important part is what you said was right. As early stage investors, like for angel investors, they invest not into the idea but you, right?
Mhm.
And I feel like that's probably the right decision because when you look at a lot of successful companies out there, they make pivots all the time, right? But the one thing that stays very uniform is that the founders don't quit. The founders always
Yeah,
find a way to make things work. And fortunately and unfortunately, as long as you don't quit, Gaurav, the company will not fail. Right. Obviously, there are other
yeah,
factors too, like when you run out of money and whatnot, then you fail. But like I think that with every company, it's like if you're like truly plugged into your ecosystem and you understand the market really well and you understand your audience, you're gonna find something that works overall. And I commend to you and thank you for so much for sharing that experience too about how you pivot and resolve issues with your co-founder because it's not an easy thing, right? So I know earlier you mentioned that at one point you were generating like $2 to $3 million per month, I believe, and that's an absolutely crazy number to realize that this isn't working. So at what point did you make that decision, and what kind of metric did you look at to be like, oh wow, even though we're making this amount, we're not having a product market fit? And I
yeah,
think you're absolutely right with that when you mentioned that sometimes when you launch a product, you want it to fail because then you know exactly what doesn't work. But when you launch a product that somewhat works but doesn't work completely, where do you even start? Right?
yeah. Oh man, totally. I think it's like another analogy, and I was talking to someone else, and I'm sure you've seen this too, is that one person on your team who is brilliant and you love him and you keep them, right? And there's one person on your team who's a complete idiot. And you know everyone's saying that person is a bad fit, and you know exactly that person's a bad fit. But then there's that one person who is average at their job and they can grow, there's potential, but they're not performing really well. They're actually a nice person. Like you love and you like hanging out with them. How do you let that person go or make a decision on what to do? That's the hardest. I feel just kind of giving you that analogy here. And I think I'll go back to one thing that you shared with me. There was a time where we had a lot of growth hypotheses and we built like a spreadsheet with which literally said and the spreadsheet started with what is one of our hypotheses is like reduced churn rate as an example, and then the second column was like how important is it, like on a scale of 1 to 5, how important is this like to work, and the hypothesis like 5, it's really important. The next column was, and pardon my friendship, but we said how fucked are we going to be if it doesn't work. And I was like 1 to 5 and we said 5, and every time, and then we just went one by one trying to like like correct if you're doing, it's called the lean philosophy. There's a book by Eric Ries, the lean startup. That's the philosophy. So you're trying to just figure out what works, what doesn't work, and really bias your opinions on data. And some of the results we were getting is that we just don't have good product market fit. Now, either we can try a few more things and try to make it work. And I think I just went back to saying, I've been at this for 4 years and we've tried so many things. And a lot of it was me not being an expert and us not being a great team to execute on this. But then we just, the de facto was maybe the market's not ready and the market's not there and maybe it's just not going to work out. Even if Steve Jobs was trying to do this, or even if Elon Musk tried to solve this problem, maybe it's not us, maybe it's the market, and market's telling us something. So I think that was a decision. I think I'll also go back to one point you made is also about happiness. I feel like we tried so much and failed again and again that it just didn't we didn't feel happy. Like I remember with my co-founder and some of our key staff, we built like few more tables of things we could try, and everybody was there was just sense of like unhappiness. We were like, we're not happy trying to solve these problems again, and that was the moment where we knew in our guts that's not going to work out. It probably pivot is the best way to go, or maybe closing doors. We even thought about. I remember I was reading this blog about how to shut down your company, and I had like a checklist, and it's the hardest feeling. Like I've never done that before, but it happens, right? Like people don't talk about it, but there's so many companies that shut down, and so many founders who probably search for that and follow a checklist where it may include sending a goodbye email to your users, returning capital to your VCs, how to like do public facing things, how to do compliance things internally. I was ready to do that. It's a hard feeling, and doesn't get talked about, but it happens.
Oh man, that's just gut wrenching things to hear because like there is always some sort of relatability with that, right? I think as founders, it's like there, the highs are highs, the lows are lows, and like the fact that you
Yeah.
unfortunately was looking into that. That's I can't imagine how tough that was for you to feel. Oh man, it's I know I run my own startup myself, so it's like I completely understand that feeling where it's like things are great, oh things are not great, and the moment that it switches from good to bad is like instant. You're like, what the heck? I didn't have time to
And the
celebrate.
worst, yeah, and the worst part, it can happen in the same day, right?
Yeah.
You can have like an amazing thing and a really bad thing same day.
Yeah, that is a very common
Yeah.
theme with all startups, and not just yourself, by the way. We have a lot of
Yeah.
people on the podcast that very, very common theme, but overall, it's like it's the founder that makes a huge difference. Are you still having fun with your stuff? Are you still passionate? Because
Mhm.
once that passion runs out, your company will die, right?
Exactly.
But once you have that passion, you'll overcome any challenges, even no matter how bleak everything seems, you're gonna find a way and a solution to make it work. As long as you don't give up, your mental health's good, and you cut deep down your gut, you kind of know what to do already. So I'm kind of
Yeah.
curious too. It's like as you're pivoting your product and you found a new niche and you didn't quite know how it works yet.
Mhm.
There's two parts to this question. One of it, how did you convince your investors to believe in you? Did anyone ever pull out when you made that pivot? And the second
Mhm.
part is, what was your user acquisition plan? I was really curious about that.
Yeah. Oh man, both good questions. So I'll give you the kind of the real version of the first part. Um, I remember, so I had a lot of stockholders. Some were VCs, some were early angels, some were just early staff members, and I think it's a matter of belief. And it's hard. It's hard. I feel when we went to our VCs and our investors, everyone follows what the lead investor is doing. That's very common if you see in companies. The lead is the closest to the company. They know exactly what's going on. They spend the most time with the company. And they have the most equity. They've put in the most amount of money usually. So our lead investor was extremely convinced that we can succeed as founders, which we're incredibly blessed to have because even though we didn't work as a company, they believed in us and they believed in me. So they kind of signaled to all the other VCs that this can work, and they kind of saved anyone causing legal troubles or trying to pull out or get equity back or all of those things. But there were people who I had worked with, Brian, who had like spent a lot of years working and trying to sell this product and build a company together, who didn't believe in it anymore, and they had the opportunity to sell their stocks, and a lot of them did, and a lot of them did at really low prices, like extremely low prices, just to like someone had a big chunk of the company, and I don't share this that quite often, but they got out for $10,000 or something like that because they felt that that is more than anything that the company can ever become. So that's just a hard feeling to go through that. And a couple of angels backed out as well, and they wanted their money back, which we try to loan or do whatever from the company funds to make sure that we can do the right thing for everybody. I think that was hard. That was really hard to like see the dispassion that some people had towards failure, and just thinking that since you failed once, you'll always fail. I think that was hard. I think that was your first question. So the second question you were asking is kind of how did we went about user acquisition? I feel the approach we had, Brian, was feedback. We really wanted to learn and genuinely were curious about the new market because we were not experts in it. And this time we just went like cold email people, LinkedIn messaged the audience. Like our thesis was that, hey, SaaS companies, they go through a lot of churn. They'll be ideal buyers. People like CEOs and chief revenue officers and chief customer officers could be really good buyers. So we just cold reached out to people and said, hey, this is what we're building. Do you have some time for feedback? And a lot of them, as our pitch got better, they started saying on feedback calls, this is really interesting. If you have it, I may even check it out. And we would say, great, we actually have a demo we can show you. And that's kind of how we landed our first users. It was just like cold outreach, not trying to sell anything, but understand and learn from the market.
That is definition of hustle right there. And hopefully you guys have a really good pitch, because every time I check my LinkedIn, I get hundreds of pitches. I'm just like, what is going on?
I bet you do. Hey, maybe you search for my name and I may have pitched you like a year ago.
I'm pretty sure. No, I'm just kidding. At some point, we have to put in the hustle, that like work, right? Because
yeah, you can always hustle, right?
it is a network. It is a network effect, right? Because once you get enough users and critical mass, it's like it starts growing on its own, and that's the best feeling, because that's when you quote unquote call it the market, like product market fit, right? Because people retention is high, interest is high, signups are high, growth is high, product market fit's awesome. But I think for most misconception about building a product is that when you put it out there, guess what? Your first week, 2 weeks, you're not gonna get any traction, and it sucks. That feeling where it's like, oh crap, like I'm building something that no one wants to do. And the fact that you have to take it back and have that growth mindset to continuously reiterate on it and improve upon it is extremely important to finding that extreme product market fit and building a successful product. So it takes a lot of grit and grind, more than people ever think it's going to be, right? So as a second time founder, I'm going to have to ask you this question. Do you believe focusing on the product is more important, or distribution is more important? And why?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I know. I think, oh man, I think I'm a product focused founder, so I would say product is more important than distribution. And it doesn't have to be the world's best product, but it has to be the world's best product for your audience, right? Like it has to be the audience you're trying to serve, or at least the starting audience you're trying to serve. They need to find incredible value with your product. And I think that is just phenomenally more important than having great distribution. That is my thesis because I'm a product-led founder. Distribution is extremely important, but it's so much easier when you have a great product and a value proposition that resonates with your users than you're just selling a vision and a dream, and you're just using psychological tricks on people trying to convince them to buy. My opinion. Well, what is yours? I'm curious now. What do you think? What is more important?
I think products are really important. Like finding that good user experience. But I also feel like distribution is equally important, but not as important as product itself. Because if your distribution is strong but your product doesn't quite fit, then guess what? You're gonna fail, right? But at the same time, it's like I feel like with a great product, it's like if you hustle enough, like you'll convince the world that it's a great product, because it really is, right? But it all comes down to understanding what you said earlier, your audience. Like, do you understand your audience? Does this take care and solve the problem at hand, right? And as it's solving the problem, would it piss off the users to use this product because it's slow, is it gunky, is it hard to use, is it hard to understand, all these things, right? Like, given nowadays there's so much resources out there, you can ask for everyone's opinion. Not everyone, you don't want everyone's opinion, but you can ask enough opinions to like define and revamp your product, because guess what? Like, we all want the best for you. We all want a product that's easy to use, right? So I agree with you. I think product should come first, definitely. Um, and I have a question too. Like, I feel like, running a company is extremely difficult. Like, how do you time manage your time and time block your day, where it's like, this is Gaurav time, this is work time, this is whatever fun time, right? I do find that most founders, especially startup founders, work 7 days a week, 60 hours a week, 100 hours a week. And I feel like the grind and hustle culture can be very detrimental, just because, like, oh, we can't stop, we gotta keep moving, we gotta keep going. So, like, for your personal self, like, how do you find time to care yourself?
Yeah, it's very hard. I feel wow, what a great question. I feel I'm just so bad at it. I think I'm really bad at time management because I like to wander. I really enjoy wandering on topics and things, and I like to just think about things, and I'm always late on delivery timelines, I feel, just because I get really engaged in topics. Um, and that sometimes leads to a lot of original thinking. Like I was reading somewhere that Martin Luther King didn't come up with, like all the phrases that he used that became so iconic, like until 5 a.m. in the morning of the same day, right? And it's just and there's a lot of like studies that show procrastination and being lazy or delayed on things can actually help you be more creative, which I don't know is true or not, but but I but I am like that. I am, which doesn't help because I feel a lot of founders are like that and they spend tons of time on things where they're not really working that hard, but they're just wasting time. And then they end up working 80, 90, 100-hour weeks. And I do too. Sometimes I work 10-hour days for 7 days a week. Um, yeah, but I don't think I'm working hard on, like, I'm not working every single day being completely productive. So maybe there's some people who are very productive and they know how to manage their time. They probably can do it sooner. I don't know. I don't know what their best. I'm digressing here, but I think it's hard. I don't think I'm efficient with my time, but I enjoy not being efficient with my time. And a lot of founders do, and that's why they waste a lot of time and
Yeah.
ultimately end up working 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 120 hours a week,
Yeah.
where they could have just done it in 20. What do you think?
I really appreciate your level of transparency and letting us know that this is something that you're still working on. It's which is awesome for us to hear too, is the level of authenticity that we can relate to. Um, I personally think that everyone works differently, and you gotta find what's best for you. Right? Some people
Yeah, I
like to
love
work really
that.
fast. Some people like to work slow. But at the end of the day, it's like, can you get your stuff done and at the highest level?
Yeah.
That is the part that matters the most, because you can't use the cookie cutter mode of like an entrepreneur that works really fast, works really efficiently, works really hard. That's not everyone, right? No one, not everyone fits into that mode, and you have to find things that work for you. And sometimes we see people are like, oh, you should wake up 5 a.m. and do this and that. I think if it's not kind of myself, I'm kind of a morning person, but like counting other people, it's like some people can't function at 5. For me, I can't function past 10. Right. So it's like you have to find what
Yeah.
works for you. You have to find what works where you're sitting at your desk and you're doing the great work that you do. And that zone is your zone of genius. Right. No one can take that
Yeah,
away from
I love
you.
that.
Once you're in your zone of genius, it's like it doesn't matter how you get there. As long as you get stuff done and your mindset's great and you don't have self doubt, you're productive. Like, some people enjoy working 100 hours a week. That's fine. As long as your mental health is great. Some people like having boundaries and working very set hours. That's great too, as long as your mental health is great. So it's back to who you are as a person, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. It's not a one size fit all, right? The biggest thing
Yeah.
is like, is your North Star good? Are you getting your work done? Are you putting out the great product to the world that you think that can happen? Because great work takes time and everybody works differently. That's just my opinion.
I like that. I really enjoy your feedback. Yep.
Of course, man. So we have one final
Zone
question.
of genius.
Yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
So we have one final question, Gaurav. And that question is, if you can give advice to your 10-year-old self, what advice would that be?
Ooh, one just comes to mind, and it's so cool that you asked that question because I've struggled with this a lot. I feel I struggle a lot with imposter syndrome, and I think a lot of immigrants, Asians do, right? Like if you think about it, we have a lot of imposter syndrome because of our circumstances, how we grew up, and trying to fit in. I feel just believe in yourself is one advice I would give. It's just so incredibly generic. What does it even mean? But I think that's something that I could have used a lot at 10 years old, at 12 years old, at 16, at 20, at 30. And I bet even when I'm 90, I could give advice to my 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old to just believe in myself. I think believe in yourself would be one thing I would tell my younger self.
That is absolutely good advice, right? I think that either you believe in yourself or you found someone else that believes into you that unlocks your true potential. And that goes a long
Yeah,
way. And I feel like what you shared, it's like very typical of it, like especially like an Asian immigrant mindset where it's like, a
yeah,
lot of times where your parents wanted you to fit into a certain mold, right? And sometimes that might not be your zone of genius. So that kind of actually destroys your self-esteem and now you don't believe into yourself. But it really takes that
exactly.
one person that believes into you that you can do it. And in actuality, I firmly believe that everyone out there is capable of doing great things. It's just sometimes that unfortunately people aren't in an opportunity or environment that believes into them, you
Yeah.
know. So I do agree with your answer and I like that a lot. So Gaurav, where can our listeners find out more and reach out to you
Yeah,
online?
absolutely. My name is Gaurav Bhattacharya. I'm on LinkedIn. I think that would be the easiest way to connect to me. But I'm also at Gaurav at involve.ai. If anyone has any questions, I can answer, help them with their careers or anything that maybe I have gone through that you're going through right now. I would love to hear from you and help out. I think those would be the two best places to reach me.
Awesome. Well, Gaurav, thank you so much for sharing your story, your startup journey with us. Huge inspiration. Can't wait to see what you're going to accomplish in the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years. But thank you so much for being on our
Absolutely.
podcast today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank
Yeah,
you, Brian. Thanks for your time.
of course.